Radical constructivism is radical in the sense that it truly departs from modernist point of view with regards to metaphysical realism and comes to embody the postmodernist point of view with regards to Kantian idealism. So, as a radical constructivist, while I can use this computer that I'm filming this video on, I cannot come to know the truth with a capital T about the computer. Really, I can only come to understand how this computer works for me at this point in time, which is to say that it's a machine that allows me to complete the work I need to do in a way that makes sense and works for me. So if we talk about truth from a radical perspective, truth is truth because I made it so, because it's true to me and for me. Consequently, because I was the sole progenitor of that truth, thanks to the experiences I had in making that truth, I have brought stability to my world. So if another person, say my husband, had come to know something as true, if I do not agree with his conclusion of that truth, my stability is rocked because it was he who arrived at that truth. And I need to be able to find balance, so bring back stability into my life by, through my own experiences, making his ideas viable to my life. And this radical idea of viability is something that I will come back to a little later in my presentation. So it's radical constructivism is constructivism in the sense that I still create my own knowledge. That is, that my knowledge is created through my experiences. But more importantly, the knowledge that I create is useful to me. And this idea of functionality is what sets radical constructivism apart from general constructivism. What it means is that the knowledge that I create is dependent on my perceptions and interpretations of the experiences that I engage in. It is also, that knowledge is also inhibited by my current perceptions and interpretations, which is to say that how I construct new knowledge is based entirely on how that new knowledge reacts and interacts with my current knowledge. Therefore, new knowledge will either correlate, or as Piaget states it, assimilates with my existing knowledge, or it will transform, or again, as Piaget asserts, represents my existing knowledge to fit my current situation in a way that works for me. Again, speaking about that idea of viability. This cognitive idea of new knowledge correlating or transforming with existing knowledge fits with the constructivist idea that making new knowledge is an active pursuit. It makes sense to me because when I think about my role as a doctoral student at Virginia Tech, I know that on a daily basis, I am actively assimilating and representing my cognition of the world as I work to synthesize all of the knowledge, information, and experiences I have on a daily basis. So if I return to my earlier example, as a radical constructivist, the knowledge that I have about this computer I'm filming my video with, I create for myself based on the numerous interactions that I have had with my computer. I create new knowledge about the computer as my perceptions and interpretations of my interactions with it assimilate or represent my existing perceptions and interpretations. What matters is that the knowledge that I create is useful to me because I can use it to make the computer more functional for my life and the work that I do in it. So what struck me most significantly is the radical constructivist idea of viability. Most likely because this idea of viability of my knowledge truly resonates with how I interact with the world, or at least how I perceive and interpret the way I currently and have in the past reacted and interacted with the world. So, because I identify as a native Hawaiian, I have particular perceptions and interpretations of the world which affects the way I interact with it and come to understand it. Let's take, for instance, my decision to move to Blacksburg to continue my doctorate program. There was a lot of issues and situations that I needed to take into consideration prior to making my final decision to come here. What was I going to do about the job that I had at the time? How was that job going to figure into my decision? What was I going to do about employment while in Blacksburg, attending school, and when I return home, since it looked like I would be resigning from the job I had at the time? How would I pay for existing bills without any concrete form of employment? Where would I live when I moved to Blacksburg? How would I pay for it? How will I pay for my tuition and books when I'm still not sure about what scholarships I would be getting and how much those scholarships would total? And finally, how will this situation affect my marriage, knowing that I would be apart from my husband for a full school year? When I started this, I had mentioned that I identify most predominantly as a native Hawaiian, and that knowledge of the way of life and the way of thinking as a native Hawaiian played a huge role in my ability to solve this problem and to make a decision, because using native Hawaiian values and ways of thinking and ways of interacting in and with my world was what's viable to me at the time. So when reflecting on my management of this past experience, I could clearly see how the radical constructivist idea of viability truly played a role in how I arrived at my decision. I made the decision to resign from the job I had at the time because it was what worked for me at that time. Last year, I received a multi-year scholarship worth 80% of my tuition costs that I was unwilling to sacrifice. And since I had exhausted all of my online classes, it was imperative that I take this year to satisfy my residency requirement. By resigning from my position, while I would be unemployed when I return, the decision worked for me at that moment because the native Hawaiian way of thinking required me to put first the idea and value of imina'awau, which is to continually seek knowledge in order for me to grow as a person and to better provide for and help my community. I made the decision to pursue employment with local school districts here in Blacksburg because it was what would work for me when I arrived here, knowing that I would need to have steady employment in order to afford to pay existing bills and new bills while attending Virginia Tech. Although I knew it would be a struggle to work a full-time teaching job and attend school full-time, This decision was the most viable option from a native Hawaiian point of view because ohana, or my family, and being able to care for my family in the way that we were already used to was what worked for me at that moment. Together with my husband, we decided that 1 year apart was a worthwhile sacrifice for us to make based on the future possibilities my doctorate program would offer. Again, this decision worked for both of us at that time, when again thinking of that native Hawaiian value of ohana and really putting the family first in front of our own personal decisions. When considering the radical constructivist concept of viability, I am glad that I finally have an ideology that I can attach to my way of approaching problems, as exhibited in this example that I shared. I guess there is a certain reassurance in knowing that the way I think is not too far off from the ideas of great philosophers like Piaget and von Glasersfeld. There is also a certain reassurance in knowing that my approach to life, my approach to my passion for education also aligns with great philosophers and the ideology of constructivism. Thank you.